I'm so excited. I love this movie.
Ryan, it's about to start.
Sorry. Hello, welcome to the fourth episode of our podcast, Surreal. This is the podcast in which we ask our teacher, Mr. Binder, for movie recommendations. We watch them, and then we come back and share our thoughts on it. I'm Ryan. I'm joined by...
I'm Meredith. Hello.
This week, we asked for an action film, and we were given The Bridge on the River Kwai. Here's the description. British POWs are ordered by their Japanese captors to construct a bridge of strategic importance and are happy to sabotage and delay the progress until their commanding officers order them to continue the work unhindered to its completion. But are his actions tantamount to collaboration with the enemy? It was given a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I'd have to agree.
Yeah, So this film was from 1957, and I thought that it was really good for 1957. Even just coming down to, like, coloring, if that makes sense, because, you know, like, they were just starting to get into, like, Technicolor at that time. And so I thought that the whole movie looked really good, and it was a bit slow, especially, like, the first 2 hours were kind of slow, but it also... there was plot to it the whole time.
Yeah, the movie's about 2 hours and 40 minutes long, which when I first saw that, I was like, oh, uh-oh. But as Meredith said, it is a fairly slow movie until you get to about the second half of it. So we won't spend as much time on the first half as we usually do. At least we'll try not to spend as much time. But basically, the movie starts out and you're introduced to this character. He's like, honestly, I don't remember all the characters' names. It was this like American guy who was like a soldier, and he's in this Japanese camp. What do you know, like, what war this is supposed to be taking place in?
This is World War II.
This is World War II. Okay, he's in this Japanese camp, and he's basically being held prisoner along with a bunch of other guys, and they're being forced to work on a bridge to be built over a river to have trains come across it, and it's really, really important to the Japanese.
Yeah, it's so important that the commanding officer from the Japanese military, he has to commit ritual suicide if they don't get the bridge done in time. That was a big factor for like the Japanese side of things, a big motivation for them, and they finally were able to convince the British to actually like get cracking on it, because at the beginning the British were kind of like slow.
We didn't say they also, after you're introduced to the American guy, there's a big group of British soldiers that are brought in, and they're interesting to say the least.
Yeah, they're very, very characteristically British.
For sure.
Like the songs that they're humming and stuff are all very characteristically British. And so yeah, at the beginning all the British soldiers are kind of like dragging their feet. They don't really see any like huge rush, but then the Japanese guy explains like, I'm gonna have to commit suicide if you don't do this, so please do this.
I mean, but you have to keep in mind that all these soldiers, they're prisoners of war pretty much, you know, and the Japanese are trying to force them to work on this bridge, and their commanding officer, do you remember what his name was?
No.
Okay, we'll refer to him as the British commanding officer. But
there
basically,
were a lot of names.
This guy is really, really stubborn. That's his defining characteristic.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole time, the Japanese leader is trying to like force all of his men to work. And you know, he's fine letting his men work, but he doesn't want the British high-ranking officers to work because that's against the Geneva Convention, as he states multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
But the Japanese commander is having none of this. He wants every person that they have to be working. And so these British officers, they all just stand there stubbornly and they refuse to work until eventually they get like locked up, and like the one guy, they call it the oven.
Yeah.
Which this was like, it's kind of, ooh. They throw him in like a metal box that's just sitting out in the sun, and they left him there for days. It was kind of like...
yeah, no food, no water.
Yeah,
no
it's kind of
anything.
crazy. But eventually, like, the Japanese guy gives in, and he agrees to not force the British officers to work on the bridge. And throughout this whole time, the American guy that I said earlier ends up escaping from the camp, and he's the only one to escape. He went with a group of guys, but he was the only one to escape. And they assume he's dead, but he's actually not. He winds up later in the movie, and he's in like a military hospital sort of thing. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that was the part where I got sort of confused.
Yeah,
Like
'cause
just for a second because it
I
cuts.
thought he was dead for sure.
Well, I thought he was dead, but so we're like looking at a scene in the camp, and then it cuts to this woman on a beach, and she's then joined by this guy, and I
Yeah.
was like, am I watching the same movie?
Yeah, it's
What-
very
Where did
very
this
strange.
where did this twist come from? So I was like really confused for a couple seconds, but then it's sort of explained like this guy, he just escaped, like he was found by a military helicopter out on just surveillance, and they saved his life basically when they found him. And so then
But back at the camp this whole time, the British are helping the Japanese build this bridge, and they realize that the spot that the Japanese are building the bridge is not a good spot to put a bridge. Basically, like the riverbed is like too soft or something, so it wouldn't be able to support a bridge. And so basically, the British the entire time, originally the men without the officers commanding them were kind of like sabotaging the bridge. They were making it like really, really badly.
Mhm.
Like literally, they would just like they would build entire sections and then they'd let it fall over on its own.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. And then there would be scenes of them like swimming in the river, just like goofing off.
Mhm.
But then eventually the Japanese let their officers command them in building the bridge, and the main British officer, for some reason, he's really like hung up on making this bridge to the best of his ability.
I think that he because near the end of the movie they're like putting a plaque up that says like, oh, this
Yeah,
was built by the
he was, like-
British. He's kind of doing it for like the pride of it almost, so
Yeah.
like people know this is a British bridge, you know.
Yeah,
like
he was
it's so
saying
good.
he was like at one point he was saying that after the war people would use that bridge, and he wanted them to know that it was British soldiers that made that bridge, and it was because of them that people could use it nowadays. But at the same time, like it's about to be used in war to like transport goods.
Yeah.
And the whole time, like some of the other officers are questioning him. They're like, why would you not sabotage the bridge? Because that's kind of like helping the enemy in a way.
Mhm.
But he explains that like that's what he wants to do. Well, not that he wants to help the enemy, but he wants the bridge to be there because he wanted to feel pride in his work, and he wanted the men serving under him to feel pride in their work.
Yeah, I think he figures like they're prisoners of war, like they don't really have a choice
Yeah.
to build the bridge, so they might as well make it to the best of their ability so
Yeah.
that later they can say like, oh, we did this. Yeah, so they're working on building the bridge. It's going pretty okay. The guy who escaped, his name is Shears. He gets invited to like join this commando mission to destroy the bridge. So a high-ranking military officer basically says like, we're going in, we're going to destroy the bridge, we're going to try to free the prisoners of war.
And this was I believe it was a British like high
Yeah,
ranking
it was the
guy.
British.
And if you remember the other guy, what was his name? You said
Shears.
Shears. Yeah, Shears is an American, so you know
Mhm.
they technically don't have any like reign over him. But apparently, this British like commander tells him that he was given word from the American military that he was supposed to help them on this mission, and so basically his hands are tied now, and he has to go back to this camp no matter how much he doesn't want to.
Yeah, and he very vocally protests like, I don't want to go back.
Yeah.
I'll like die if I go back. He just does not want to go back. But eventually he ends up conceding, and so they start to plan like, okay, we're going to go in. This is how we're going to do it. And you can start to see like both storylines are starting to like
Yeah.
weave together.
There was 4 men that were supposed to go on this commando mission to blow up the bridge, and one of the men died as they like parachuted out of planes, and the one man ended up in trees, and he ended up dying
Yeah.
there. And then they were joined by a bunch of like natives of the area, and they kind of like went with them the whole way, and they had to walk like several miles to get to this bridge.
Yeah.
And so they went like all day, all night to get there. And eventually they get there and they start hatching a plan to blow it up. And they have these like, I don't even know the science behind it, but it was like some sort of explosives, which I was like, how do they have these back then? This is kind of like old.
Yeah. They're like, I think they were just like wired explosives,
Yeah.
and they had really, really long wires so that they could string it along the riverbed.
And they were like waterproof too somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is where we're going to get into like, this is where the plot gets really interesting and really starts to pick up. The British who are planning to destroy the bridge, they go in, like, they cover themselves in like mud and paint and stuff so that they'll be invisible. And they go in at night while the prisoners of war are celebrating the completion of the bridge back at like the camp. There's this huge celebration going on. It's really loud, so they think that they'll be able to like sneak in and plant these bombs under the bridge without being detected. And they do, because they go in under the cover of night. They swim under the bridge and plant these bombs everywhere, and then string them along the riverbeds.
And they take the wire and like the detonator down the river, and they put it like on the side of the river, and they leave one guy there to detonate it, and the other guys go back to the other side of the river because the one man was injured in like a fight on the way there, and so he couldn't go with them. Actually, it might have just been two of them that went in the water, but the other guy, which was the American, went back across the river with the injured man, and it was just this like young, was he British? I guess he was
his
British.
name was Joyce.
Yeah, Joyce, that's it. Joyce was left on the other side of the river to set off the detonator. And right before they set this up, they had like a radio, and the radio told them that there was going to be a train that was going to go across the bridge the next day. And so they figured they would take out the bridge and a supply train at the same time.
Yeah, which is, I mean, a pretty good plan.
Yeah, pretty good strategy. But unbeknownst to them, during the celebration, I believe it was, the British officer that helped build the bridge, he reveals to another one of the characters that all of the injured British soldiers were going to be on that train and were going to be transported across it and taken to safety.
Yeah, so they had made plans to move everyone from this camp to another camp, and that's how they were going to do it with these trains, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, because like then you hear that and you're like, oh, they're going to blow up that train.
Yeah.
And they're going to kill all the injured guys on it.
And then you're realizing that this whole movie is just a big miscommunication.
Yeah.
So then night falls, everyone just pretty much goes to sleep, and then they wake up the next morning, and Shears and Joyce both find that the river levels have gone down a lot, so you can see some of the wires.
You can see the wire in certain spots.
Yeah.
And there was one really noticeable part. There was a stick suspended outside of the water, and the wire was like draped over top of the stick, and it was extremely noticeable.
Yeah, and so they start to get like anxious about that. They're like, should we blow it now or should we wait for the train? And they decide to wait for the train.
Well, Joyce decides to wait for the train. The other guys wanted him to do it like in that moment, but they have no way of communicating.
Yeah.
So
Joyce just decides we're waiting for the train, and so as the British the prisoner commander, they're all waiting on the bridge, sort of like waiting for this train to come. They're all gonna wave, whatever. They're just waiting for this train to come. You can start to like hear a train whistle in the background. It's pretty quiet at this point, but the British prisoner commander is just pacing up and down the bridge, and he notices the string in the water.
Yeah.
And he gets one of the Japanese officers to come down and look with him. And so he goes down the riverbank and he starts seeing more and more. And then he looks down and there's wire, like,
and he pulls the wire up and he starts following it to find out where it leads to.
Yeah, he starts pulling it up out of the sand.
And the whole time the train is getting closer and closer. You can hear by the whistle. And so the man, he just gets closer and closer to where Joyce is with the detonator.
Yeah.
And
it keeps cutting back to Shears and the other guy, and they're like, blow it, Joyce, blow it now.
Yeah, they want him to like blow it up before he gets caught, and then he doesn't have a chance to, but
yeah, and this whole scene, like, this is the big scene of the movie. This is the scene that everyone knows. And so it's like ramping, like your heart rate's starting to
Yeah.
ramp up because you're like, okay, like he either needs to blow it or he's gonna get killed.
Yeah.
And so the British commander and the Japanese commander stop, and they're like looking around. They're holding the wire, and they're like 10 feet from Joyce.
Yeah.
And he like looks across the river, and he kind of sees that Shears is like indicating for him to blow it up. But he pulls out his knife and he goes over and stabs the Japanese commander in the back.
And he's trying to plead with the British commander because they're in the same military. He's like trying to help, but the British commander does not want the bridge blown up because the entire time he was so fixated on this bridge, and he's prepared to die to save this bridge pretty much. Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't know that like this whole plan was created
he
by
had-
the British
he had no
military.
clue this was happening.
So at this point, Shears is watching the British commander and Joyce from across the riverbank, and he decides like, I need to step in. So he jumps into the river and he starts swimming across.
And the whole time he's swimming, he's yelling at Joyce, kill him, because this British commander is like basically going against their plan. He's trying to stop Joyce from blowing up the bridge.
Yeah, and that catches the attention of the guards on the bridge, and they just start firing round after round into the water. They hit Joyce, I think, first.
Yeah.
Because Joyce is like crawling away, and they hit him in the side, and he starts bleeding out, and I think he dies pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then they hit the British commanding officer, and he falls onto the detonator.
Yeah, they kill Joyce, they kill Shears, and then they kill the British officer.
As the train is coming across.
When he dies, his body falls on the detonator as the train goes across. And the whole time I was like, oh man, because I could see it coming. And then, obviously the bridge blows up with the train on it. The train ends up in the water. It
goes down car by car just into the water. And I think because it's 1957, I think that was real. Like they did that for real.
Yeah, it looked incredible.
It
they
looks
must have.
fantastic.
Yeah,
like
for
the whole
sure.
explosion, watching the cars go down, it was amazing. And then basically how the movie ends is one of the guys that was on the blowing up the bridge mission, I think he was like lagging behind or something, or he was hiding in a tree somewhere.
It was the guy on the commando mission. He got shot in the foot or something, so he had to stay back pretty much.
Yeah.
And
he like is watching all of this happen, and he kind of stumbles out of his hiding spot, and he's like closer to Joyce and the British commanding officer, and so he like stumbles over there, and he's like, this is madness.
Yeah, he just keeps saying madness over and over.
Yeah, he keeps saying madness over and over again, and then it cuts to a wide shot of him just stumbling across this beach, and then it like zooms out, I think like a helicopter.
Yeah.
They had the camera like on a helicopter, and they just zoom out, and that's how the movie ends.
It just keeps zooming out, and it goes like wider and wider. It's like incredible.
Yeah,
Great way to end the movie. It was just
this movie was so incredibly well shot. I enjoyed watching it just because of that.
Yeah,
and I mean the story was really good too.
Yeah.
I enjoy like stories that are kind of like miscommunications, and that like creates the big twist at the end. I did feel like this movie dragged just a tiny bit at the beginning, but
yeah, it definitely did. But I mean, at the same time, you were also getting like
you're getting a lot of information.
a lot of important information. You're also getting introduced to the characters pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think I went into this like this is a 2-hour and 47-minute movie. By the way, that's just
very long movie.
Yeah, so I went into that with like kind of like, oh, this is gonna be kind of long, and I'd also heard from someone who's watched this before, she said like, oh, everything kind of happens in the last like half hour. So I was kind of strapped in, but I was like pleasantly surprised, like getting to see the characters, getting to see, because this felt like a pretty accurate depiction of prisoner of war camps.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know specifically if like everything is historically accurate.
Yeah, I
but
mean we've never been in a prisoner of war camp, so we wouldn't know.
I mean,
but
it felt pretty realistic, and
definitely.
it felt, I don't know, I just thought it was really good.
It was great
in that sense.
The storyline with that British like commander in the camp, it was just so interesting to me, like how fixated he was on making the bridge, and the whole time you kind of, understand like where he's coming from. You're like, yeah, they will use the bridge after the war, and yeah, those people like they'll be like prideful that like a British group made that, but like at the same time, it's that moral dilemma of like, well, that's helping the enemy in the war though, and it's just such a good movie, such a good movie.
Yeah, just like, I don't know, there were a lot of characters that like felt so human in this movie, which was really good because they all just felt like
the acting was really good too. I thought, it
was. I just think like every character felt pretty human.
Definitely.
In the fact that like, oh, they're all just stuck in this situation. They don't want to be in it, but like they are doing what they can to survive. That's a very interesting aspect of the film to me. And obviously this is a very, very famous movie. A lot of people have seen it. It's a big film movie, if that makes sense. Like if you're a film person.
This apparently this was one of my grandfather's favorite movies, apparently, which my grandmother told me when I like put it on. But yeah, it's really interesting. I see why it was his favorite movie. It was a great movie. I loved watching it. Like, even if it did like drag on in the beginning, towards the end it made it all worth it. It was just so great.
Yeah, I think the whole like last 20 minutes to half hour made the movie worth it, because all of that build up was like, it made such a cool scene at the end. And also this movie is very popular. I was surprised, like I'd never seen it before, but this movie is so popular. Like
I never even heard of it before.
I've heard of it. You know the song "We Didn't Start the Fire" by Billy Joel? There's a line in here, "Bridge on the River Kwai," and I was listening to this song a few weeks ago, and then Mr. Binder recommended it to me, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like it was so popular that it was ingrained in that song, which is like huge historical events, which was cool to me. So overall, I think this was a very, very good war movie, and overall, just like a good movie for plot.
I would definitely recommend this if you're into like war type stuff, and like, it's not like quite like action movies of today, but it is an action movie for sure. If you like action movies, I'd definitely recommend this. It's just like all around just such a great movie. And what would you give it out of 10?
I would give it probably an 8 or 9 out of 10. Like I would definitely recommend this to people too. And like I feel like I would watch this with my dad. Or something. He's definitely seen it. But like,
I feel like my dad would love this movie.
This is definitely a movie that like if I was scrolling through like playing movies, my dad saw it, he would be like, "Oh, put that on."
Yeah.
Put that on
definitely.
now. Yeah, so overall 8 or 9 out of 10, probably leaning towards 9 just because of how cool it looked. Like the whole movie was so well done in terms of cinematography and coloring and stuff. Like
for how old it is, like to be that good, it's really something,
Yeah.
I would agree with an 8 or 9 out of 10 probably. I probably wouldn't give anything a 10 out of 10, so that's as close as you can get. But just all around phenomenal movie for sure.
Yeah.
But
do you have
that's
any like closing comments about that?
But that's probably going to be it for the episode then. So thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Next episode is going to be our last episode, sadly.
Yeah, that's kind of unfortunate. It feels like this has gone.
This has been
really
a lot
fast.
of fun.
For those of you who don't know, Ryan and I have been talking about doing a podcast for a year and a half now.
It's been a long time, and finally we got the chance to, and it's been great. Yeah.
And we'll touch on that more in the next episode with our final
definitely.
goodbyes and stuff. But I think we're gonna ask for an animated movie next.
We'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Mr. Binder said that he'll try his best to think of one.
But thanks to Mr. Binder for recommending this movie. I'll definitely have to watch it again sometime. But thank you for listening. And I'm Ryan.
And I'm Meredith. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.